What's up, Ticket to Anywhere fam? Trizzy here with Leah. We are two voices, two views, and two ways to adventure anywhere.
Yes, and today we have a very special near and dear episode. Well, first of all, it is my birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I love that release day falls on my birthday. I'm 30-something. Y'all don't need to know what. 30-something though. And it's the perfect episode because this is one I did with Alpaca My Bags, and it was a heritage episode. So we talk a lot about my time in the Philippines, growing up Filipina in the US and not really feeling connected to that culture. And then finally going to the Philippines as an adult for the first time. And surprise, my dad and my stepmom were able to join me. So I got to spend time in the Philippines right before the pandemic happened in 2020. Half of it on my own, traveling there, which was amazing. Got to meet so many locals, so many foreigners as well. And then part of it, I spent about 10 days with my family, which was
That's amazing.
near and dear with me because, parents aren't getting any younger. So I was excited to be able to do that because who knows when I'll be able to do that again. And we really dig deep into what it all meant. And that was my first time in the Philippines, was only 2 years ago. So this episode was a lot of fun. I got to reminisce a lot, and it was heavy at some parts, but more with like the heaviness of realizing how much of this culture I missed out on when I was younger and finally being able to experience and enjoy it and understand it as an adult.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately I wasn't a part of that episode because I'm Chinese. But my parents were born and raised in Vietnam. They're full Chinese. I have been to Vietnam, but I have not gone to China at all. So,
And then Vietnam, as if you've listened to our older episodes, you were there when you were a lot younger.
Yeah, and more obnoxious and immature. And
we didn't even like traveling back then.
Yeah. But if I were to go back now, it would definitely be in a different perspective, and I'll feel what you felt.
Yeah, absolutely. And you speak your parents' language. That's the big thing. I don't speak Tagalog, which is one of the national languages of the Philippines. The other one is English. But I don't, I think it's different when and you'll hear this in the episode, it's different when you can go back and speak the same language. Whereas I don't speak any Tagalog, so it's a lot different for me. I look like them, yes. I mean, albeit a little bit taller, a little bit wider. But the second I open my mouth and you hear the accent, it kind of changes for you. Sad to say, but it happens everywhere you go.
Yeah,
when you're traveling. Yep.
Well put. Well put. All right. Well, let's share our coffee and tea for this episode.
Oh, yeah. So I can start off with my delicious coffee that I'm always drinking. But today we have a very special bag from Umaga Coffee. Umaga in Tagalog means morning. So Umaga Coffee is based out in Bakersfield. And of course, they are a Filipino-owned local small business highlighting coffee and beans from the Philippines, which is not... Philippines doesn't export a lot of coffee. That's not one of their big trade items. So it's very rare that you can come across coffee from the Philippines. But they do a great job of it out in Bakersfield, California. Their kids' names on the bags. And they also sell and ship Filipino desserts and pastries. And any Filipino business, I am just so proud to support. So I'm drinking Umaga Coffee beans today in my coffee.
Nice. So for my tea, it's more of a remedy tea. And it's in this mason jar. Because it's brought from the Philippines. It's ginger tea. It's powder.
Yum.
So it's good for the throat.
It's really
to
good.
Coat it if you've been talking all day, screaming all night, whatever. Feel a little soreness in the throat. So that's what our beverages are for this episode.
Yeah, cheers to you, Trizzy. And we hope you enjoy this episode on Heritage Travel.
Hey there, it's Trizzy and Leah, your hosts for the Ticket to Anywhere podcast. We created this travel podcast for you, who's just as obsessed with exploring the globe as we are. We each travel a different way and even have different work schedules. But every episode, we aim to widen your worldview, inspire you to consider a destination near or far, or learn from others. With us, you can adventure from anywhere.
Keep in touch with us on social media at Ticket2 Anywhere Podcast.
Remember to connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Never miss an episode by subscribing to Ticket Number 2 Anywhere podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Pocket Casts, and hit subscribe to follow our visual podcasts on YouTube to keep up to date on our channel.
If you find value and enjoy our episodes and special guests, please rate us and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It means the world to us and helps others find us easier. You can also leave comments or reviews on our YouTube channel or Facebook page. Be sure to search for Ticket Number 2 Anywhere podcast.
Take a screenshot of the episode you're currently listening to, share it on your socials, and tag us. Or send this episode to a friend if you think it'll be helpful for them. And if you'd like to support us by monetary means, you can do so by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Ticket Number 2 Anywhere. It's not even like sad, emotional, or like things I wouldn't want to talk about. It's just almost like, oh my gosh, I've waited so long for this moment, this trip, and it's here, you know? So
Yeah.
It's like good memories, good emotions.
Okay, good. Okay, so to get into our chat about what it means to travel home, I wanted to start by asking you about what the word home means to you. Because I feel like there's a really literal sense to the word. Like, my home is this apartment that I live in Toronto. But there's also a more abstract word for home, I think, which to me is kind of like a feeling. And it's a little more transient, I would say. Like, I didn't grow up in Toronto. In my 8 years living here, it's definitely become my home more so than the city I grew up in, which is actually Ottawa. But it's funny because I don't think of Toronto as my only home. I feel really at home in Orillia, which is where my parents live. It's a little town north of Toronto. And I also feel like a bit of my home is in the Netherlands, just because that's where my heritage is from. And I've also spent time living there. Yeah, so that's sort of my lowdown on my thoughts on the word home. And I wanted to ask, when you think of home, what do you think of?
First off, I love that you have several different homes. That means, you've made yourself comfortable and felt loved in multiple places in the world. So that's really cool. But for me, I really do think Los Angeles as a whole is home. Like Southern California is home. I was born, raised, and even educated here. And in between every travel stint, I come back to LA.
Yeah.
So, I mean, people have a lot of things to say to say about LA, but I love it for its own reasons, and I do think it's easier, if you're a native, you know the ins and outs of it. Everywhere I've lived for an extended period of time, so that includes Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and Australia, I do consider those home as well. I mean, I was there for either only a few months to a little over a year, but those places all definitely have a chunk of my heart. So my parents are from the Philippines. They immigrated, from the Philippines to the United States. So I'm first generation Filipino American. I don't actually consider the Philippines home. And after my parents, it's been almost 45 years since they've lived in the Philippines. So I don't think they consider it home either. But one day I would love to, either become so immersed in the Philippines, keep traveling back there, or, buy property there to the point where I can actually call it home. I am proud of the fact that it is where my parents are from, but I don't think I can technically call it a home.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that a bit more
Yeah.
because I kind of feel the same way about the Netherlands. And I'm actually like curious about the fact that you say your parents might not even think of the Philippines as home in the same way anymore. Just because like, and I guess when I think to my own experience, a lot of people are shocked when I don't identify much with the city that I grew up in. And it's just because I never liked it that much and I
Yeah.
left like
Yep.
years ago. But I always thought like if you had a home in another country that you would always still feel that connection to it, which I'm sure they do, but maybe not feeling it as though it's home. I don't know, that's curious to me.
Yeah. I think, it's so interesting because they came at, like, my dad joined the Navy, the US Navy, and they were only taking a bunch of select Filipinos to come over from the Philippines to the US. So he was kind of, I guess, one of the chosen ones. And that was his ticket in the 70s to get out of the Philippines when a lot
Right.
of Southeast Asian countries were going through a lot of whatever it was, political warfare, civil unrest and whatnot. So that was kind of his ticket out. And even when they came, actually met in the US. They didn't meet in the Philippines, my parents.
Hmm.
And when they got here, they actually both gave up their Philippine citizenship. So to me, it was like all these things that happened in their lives that like really, I'm like, wow, you really didn't want to be there anymore. Like
Mm-hmm.
you got out, you brought your whole family to the US, you gave up your citizenship, you found jobs here immediately, bought housing here 5, 10 years later.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so interesting. Home, I think for them is definitely it's definitely California now.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
I get that. You know, my grandparents did the same thing when they came, and because I've always sort of begrudgingly been like, why don't I have Dutch citizenship?
Right.
And my mom has always said it, oh, it's because your grandparents like gave up their passports when they
Oh,
came because they really
no.
wanted to commit to being Canadian.
Hmm.
But also, I just have
Oh.
to go back to your comment about loving Southern California and LA because I have the same thing with Toronto where a lot of people in Ontario kind of hate on Toronto, but I just every time I've gone traveling for an extended period of time,
Hmm.
I can think and remember the feeling of coming back to the city and just feeling this like warmth as I like
Hmm.
go back into the center of Toronto because I just like there's just something I love about this city so much.
I think people hate on big cities, Erin, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like, I can't
it's
tell you, even
true.
on my travels, people hate on any, it doesn't matter if the big city is in Africa, South America, Europe, it could be the best big city, and there
Yeah.
will still be a group of people that hate on it so
Yeah, it's so
much.
true. So I was curious about how many Canadians are third gen, which is what I am. My grandparents
Hmm.
immigrated here, so they were first gen. My mom was born in Canada as second gen, and then I came along. So according to Statistics Canada, as of 2018, 60% of Canadians are third gen or more.
Wow.
And yeah, I was surprised by that. And the other 40% are first or second gen. And I was
Hmm.
even more surprised by that. I thought the figure of 40% first and second gen was interesting because that's almost half of our population
Hmm.
that has very recent ties to another country, culture,
Yeah.
or home. Um, so I know that your motherland is the Philippines.
Hmm.
Could you tell us a bit about your familial connection to the Philippines and how that connection has influenced your life growing up in the US?
Yep. Yeah, so my mother has 6 other siblings, and they came over here in pairs along with their parents, my grandparents, and that was in the early 70s. And now all of my mother's side resides in Southern California. It's crazy. We're all within like a 2 hour radius of each other, so it's awesome.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's really nice. And then my father's side, yeah, like I said, he made the cut into the US Navy as one of few Filipinos, and then he was able to bring his family over one at a time, and he's the oldest of 4 siblings, so he brought them and his parents over. And then my parents actually didn't meet, they met in LA. They didn't meet in the Philippines. So they met out here. One of my aunties on my dad's side they live in Montreal, actually. So, yeah, they're Canadian because, you know what's interesting, Erin? They went to
What?
Canada because Canada would get them jobs and citizenship 10 years faster than the US could.
Oh, honestly, I think that's
Yeah.
still true because I
Oh,
think you can get
100% it's
citizenship
true.
here faster. America, it's
100%.
hard. It's hard to get citizenship
Hmm.
there. Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow,
So I do have
Montreal's
one family.
amazing. I lived
Yeah.
there too. It's a great city.
Yeah, and so honestly, all I have in the Philippines as far as extended family is like cousins of cousins. My stepmom's whole entire side of the family is still there. She's the only one that came to America actually back in like the 70s. So, as far as a lot of like immediate family and first cousins, most of them are in the US and Canada.
Mm.
Distant family, but I feel like Filipinos, we're this kind of culture where everyone's a cousin, everyone's an auntie, everyone's an uncle. So when I go back, it's like these people aren't technically like my blood, but it feels like they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I get
So,
that because actually, like all the family I have in the Netherlands now are pretty like distant family, like
hmm.
cousins of cousins and such. But for some reason, the connections between my family here and them are very tight. And I wonder if it has to do with like the distance thing that you just
Hmm.
maintain that connection, um, just to
That's
maintain like
awesome.
the connection to the home country. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so I know that growing up in my house with my parents, there was a lot of Dutch language and food and traditions that were part of my daily life. And my mom definitely put a lot of effort into teaching my siblings and I about the country that her parents had come from. It was very clear that my mom had a lot of love for the Netherlands and wanted us to be raised with that same love.
Mm.
So that heritage was definitely part of my identity growing up, and I would say it still is. How did your Filipino heritage factor into your cultural or national identity growing up? Like, did you feel Filipino in your day to day home life?
So this is an interesting question because I think in retrospect I would say no, which is kind of crazy considering I'm a first gen Filipina, but I'll tell you why. My parents split when I was very, very young, and my mother remarried a Caucasian white man, my stepfather, who I love very, very much. And so I essentially grew up in a half like Caucasian household. So there's
Oh,
only one parent implementing all the traditions,
yeah,
all the language, which I don't speak any Tagalog. I barely understand it. I can understand if there's context clues, right?
yeah.
So, um, I feel like the culture is really lost on me and my siblings, to be honest. And to add to that, I grew up in a predominantly white town.
Uh,
So, a lot of culture shock came to me when I moved down to Long Beach and went to Long Beach State for college. And it was like, wow, so many other types of Asians in the world. Like, this is actually embarrassing to admit, but like, I'm not afraid to admit it. This was my reality. Like, I was so blinded to, I guess, the diversity growing up. Like, I knew, obviously, I'm like, I look very different, but the traditions that we kept in my family were pretty subtle. And
mm,
to us, because we were still children and this, it was normal to just take your shoes off in your house. Also, why are you wearing shoes in the house? Shoes are dirty. Like little things like that we're just like, this is normal. Like, why doesn't everyone take their shoes off in the house? Or like how we have like a special greeting in the Philippines as a sign of respect. You like take your elder's hand and you like put it on your forehead, and it's like a sign of respect. And so we did that growing up. We said hi and bye to everyone in the room. We ate the lechon, like the fried pig roast for every holiday, every occasion. So small, kind of almost like non-noticeable traditions. And then when I became an adult and started realizing that I missed out on a lot of my Filipino culture growing up.
mm,
And there's no one to blame for it. Like my mom literally came from the Philippines and was trying to like survive, right? And provide for a family. So she wasn't really thinking. She's like, just raise them to be good humans. Like who care? It's hard to like
mm-hmm.
kind of keep, if she moved here, it's like how is she expected to kind of keep the traditions of like where she came from if she was trying to leave and she
Yeah,
left.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's interesting, and I talk to her about it every once in a while, but now as an adult I kind of go back on my own and figure out like what I've been missing, what could I have grown up in as far as like Filipino culture. So yeah.
Yeah. But also, I feel like there is a lot of pressure. Maybe I don't know if there's a difference between Canada and the US, but I think there's a
Hmm.
lot of pressure to assimilate when you move to a new
Yes.
country. And like, I know in some households that translates to not wanting to pass down the traditions
Hmm.
because there's a thought that like it'll make it easier for the next generation if they grow up
Hmm.
like fully immersed in like American or Canadian
Hmm.
culture. Um,
Yep, that was all the thing. That's a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends that are first generation Asian, and that was a lot of the thinking. A lot of my friends. Well, in the Philippines is interesting because English is a national language. So in the Philippines, so
oh,
first and
okay.
foremost, the fact that like a lot of people don't speak Tagalog is because they learn, a lot of first generation, excuse me, a lot of first generations don't speak Tagalog, or they only understand it, or they only understand very little, is because of like previous colonization in the Philippines. Like they've been speaking English there for like 120 years. So it's not,
Wow.
it's, I know, I feel like it's kind of crazy because it's, if you meet Filipinos, they're kind of the fastest to assimilate into a Western or North American culture, if you will.
Hmm.
That is kind of just like the general like outlook on it is that we already speak a ton of English there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. I just feel like when you come to the US, it's like, okay, now we can just finish the assimilation.
Yeah. I actually didn't know that. I haven't been to the Philippines, so I didn't know
Mhm.
that English was such a dominant language there.
Yeah, it's most people speak it actually, except maybe like the much older
Hmm.
people, the much older
Yeah.
generations. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I also just have to go back to your comment about taking shoes off because it took me a second to register that because I was like, what? You are supposed to take your shoes off when you go in a house because
Thank
that's
you.
Canadian, I guess. Like in
Is
Canada,
that
you do that.
Canadian?
Oh, yeah. Like you never keep your shoes on.
That's amazing.
But I didn't know in the US that you are supposed to keep them on. You
I
are?
think it's like the media. No, the media, always like the movies, people were always
I was
walking
gonna say,
around with their shoes
Oh,
on.
it's true. They do in
Yeah.
movies. They do.
It's very,
No.
yeah.
If you come into a Canadian house, you take your shoes off. You have
That
to.
is a cool cultural aspect that I didn't know about Canada.
Honestly, it's probably because of the weather, right? Because in the
Oh,
winter,
that's
you
true.
wouldn't
If
be
you're,
walking around the house
that's true.
dragging
You'd be
snow
trekking
through.
in like exactly ice, whatever's melted and whatnot. That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
Um, so I know, especially from talking to other people that we've had on Alpaca My Bags, that identifying with a heritage outside of the country you're born into can also complicate how you feel about the place that you were born.
Hmm.
So could you describe how your, and sorry, I think I said Filipino before. Is the correct way Filipina?
I think actually that's a this is embarrassing
I
that
just
I
don't want
don't.
to I don't want to do it wrong, but
I think if you're referring to the culture, Filipino is fine.
uh-huh.
I think if you're referring
Okay.
to me, you could say Filipina,
Filipina.
but I'm not
Okay.
offended if you say Filipino,
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So could you describe how your I still don't know which way to go. Filipina identity interacts with or impacts your American identity or like
I
how
think
they're connected or
yeah.
interconnected.
I mean, growing up, I feel like it fused barely. And I feel that as an adult, I'm able to consciously weave it into my identity now. Even though I was born and raised here, it's been, 30 plus years. So now I try to fuse it more so into my life by purposely learning about it,
Mm.
and kind of trying to work through all the generational trauma, work through all the cultural nuances, and take what I can and what I love and infuse it into my everyday life. And um, maybe if I decide to start a family of my own one day, hopefully like pass those traditions on, because I do feel like, because with the loss of the language, the fact that my brother and sisters are here, like we've lost a lot of it just by being born here and not speaking the language. And I don't want that to stop with just us. So I have a new
Mhm.
baby niece, and I'm like, okay, she's a quarter Filipina. I'm like, that's enough. We're gonna get you integrated into this culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's much easier to kind of weave like my Filipino identity as an adult. As a kid, I didn't, I wasn't raising myself. It was my mother raising me, so I just went by whatever,
Mhm.
she wanted our lives to be like, and now I can actually purposely infuse my life with it. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Are there things that you're doing like actively to infuse it back in?
I read about it a lot.
Yeah.
There's even a couple groups that I've joined, like even something as simple as like a Filipino cooking group, just to like keep updated on the recipes. I bought my
Mhm.
niece a little like first Filipino words book, and I'm not even
Aw.
kidding, it's so funny. Like in a year or two, she'll be learning, but I will too, because I
Yeah.
know like 6 words.
Yeah.
So, tiny little things like hanging around more Filipinos and noticing that, okay, these are the traditions and things that we had this similar growing up, and Yeah, just going out and finding whatever I can do, supporting Filipino business, of course.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Oh,
just wherever I
amazing.
can.
So when I was 16, my parents put me on a plane to the Netherlands all by myself to go and meet my extended family, which actually is kind of funny to think about now because like I had never met these people, a
Hmm.
lot of them, and my parents just put me on a plane and they were like, "They'll get you from the airport."
Ship you off, yeah.
Yeah. And actually it was the first time I ever got on a plane and it was also my first time ever leaving Canada. So I
Wow.
remember that first visit to the Netherlands super well because it was such like a novel and surreal experience for me.
Hmm.
I had been taught so much about the Netherlands and the culture, and so finally being there, I just remember it feeling weirdly familiar, but also foreign at the same
Hmm.
time
Hmm.
because, and I'm sure you've had this experience. I'm not fluent in Dutch, but I recognize enough of it that I could
Yep.
like understand some of the signs and read some labels and pick up little bits of conversation. And I
Hmm.
could recognize foods and brands, but I couldn't really like participate because I didn't have enough of the knowledge to be able
Yep.
to. And it's kind of it's a weird experience. So I was hoping you could tell us a bit about your first trip to the Philippines, how the trip came about, and then how it felt for you going for the first time.
Yeah. That's really cool that you went to the Netherlands while you were young, by the way. Because I did not once until I was literally 32 years old head to the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents had no interest in taking us back. It's kind of crazy. Like they just came over to the US with the wave of Southeast Asians that were, escaping that part of the world and in that time of the century. So they really came assimilated and they're like didn't think to take their kids, back to where they're from because they were trying to leave it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for years and years I was telling my parents, all right, let's go because I really wanted to go with them. I'm like, it doesn't make sense for me to visit your homeland without you. I want you to be there, and show me everything how you grew up and what you experienced and you can teach me things. And for years it was always one excuse or another.
Mm.
So I finally told my father, I was like, hey, and actually my biological father, he goes to the Philippines probably every couple of years. My mom hasn't been back in almost 45 years. But I finally told him, I was like, Dad, I'm just gonna go. And this was like end of 2019. I was like, Dad, January 2020, I'm gonna go. I booked the ticket. Yeah, yeah, we know where this is going. So he's like, oh, okay. Okay, well actually I'm already gonna be there. How about you? And then he starts rattling off all these plans. He's like, meet us at this wedding in Bacolod. I'll pay for your flights, buy a dress, I'll reimburse you for your dress, and we're gonna go here, here, here. And I was like, whoa, all of a sudden, like I actually make a move and you have all these plans already. So I was really excited because I was like, you know what? I don't know what tomorrow or next week or the next month is going to be like. Back in 2020, I said this. So I was like, I'm going to go now because and this is always my mentality traveling. I'm like, if I die tomorrow, at least I did this thing today, right?
Yeah, yeah.
so so I'm like, I'm just gonna go. I'm tired of waiting for my parents because every year it's gonna be the same. No, 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 I can't go for whatever reason. So I end up going middle of January. I spend time there traveling alone, which was fantastic, meeting other Filipinos, but also other foreigners, which I still love to do when I'm in a foreign country. And then I was able to spend half the time with my dad, my stepmom, and her entire extended family out there. And it was
Oh,
just like it was really like a homecoming. It
yeah.
was it was like what my life was growing up, but like amplified,
Wow.
and everyone was just like loud and loving and trying to feed you all the time. And then we went out to like the provinces, which is like the rural areas,
Yeah.
and it was raw. Like there was no Wi-Fi in some of the towns we went to. There were just beautiful lakes and lagoons, and we were riding around on motorbikes and sandals. Like it's just this is not life back in the big cities of LA and Toronto,
Yeah.
it
Yeah. Wow.
was very
And
like freeing. Yeah.
Did it feel kind of I remember the first, like, it's been like this every time I've gone to the Netherlands since, but every time I go, even family members that have never met me but just know of me,
Mm-hmm.
I always feel this warmness because even if we can't
Oh,
speak the same language, people are just so welcoming and they just are like happy that someone
yes.
from their extended family has come back to the original country. Did you have that same
Yes.
feeling?
Oh yes. I think it was almost like, oh my gosh, they wanted to treat me kind of like a celebrity. I don't know. Sometimes Filipinos have this fascination with like um the US
Yeah.
in a weird way, like our pop culture, right? But it's I mean, if you ever go there, it's seriously, Erin, like infused into so much Filipino culture that it's like almost hard to tell them apart, right?
Yeah.
But they really gave me the best love and treatment and took me out and make sure I was comfortable. So, I did my best to like pay my respects and pay wherever I could and ask a lot of questions and, just really spend time getting to know them and really know like the the traditions that they have growing up as a Filipino in the Philippines because I'm like that's so
Mhm.
different from me.
Yeah.
But yeah, like definitely felt the love every island that I went to, just like you did. And I think family units, like when I was listening to your story, like family units are just very proud of their families, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's beautiful. Um, I think that if you grow up second or third gen or first gen with cultural traditions from your motherland country, you can kind of build up an idea of what the home country is like.
mm,
So I know now, like, I definitely had preconceived ideas of the Netherlands before I went there that were like simply based off of what my mom had taught me and the cultural things we did at home. So I'm curious if being in the Philippines compared to how you'd imagined it or what you knew of it, like how did it match up with what you were expecting?
oh well, it is interesting because thinking back on it now, like throughout this whole conversation, very tiny things that I'm noticing are that I used to do that they still do in the Philippines. Um, but then my life kind of morphed into more of like into the American everyday culture. Like for example, I'll give you a small example. We in the shower or in the tub, because you don't want to just let the water run. Like the Philippines sometimes doesn't have the infrastructure in a lot of places. Just let the water run because that's
Hmm.
gallons per minute, right? And that's they don't have like the systems for that. So we use a literally a bucket called a tabo, and it's literally just a bucket that you wash yourself with. So you take the water, put it in a big ass bucket, and then you just like drench yourself with it, and that's how you rinse yourself out. And then my mom used to collect like the buckets from that the casinos used to give out with their
Yeah.
coins, and she used to wash it, rinse it out, and then put it in the shower for us to use. But in the
Oh,
Philippines, and then yeah, it's so funny. And but we stopped doing that, when we became, I don't know, we got into like junior high or high school, and like you don't need this anymore. And in the Philippines, like they still shower that way
yeah.
as a way to preserve water.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting how a lot of things that I used to do when I was younger, like they're still doing in the Philippines for one reason or another. Mainly, I think a lot of it is like structural, right? Like they bucket flush there also, which, I mean, we didn't used to do that here in the US, but it is, I think a lot of it is what I expected it to be, and I was excited to experience that. It's always curious to me to really go find the locals, live with them for a few weeks, even a few days, and see how they really, really live. And it's always interesting comparing lifestyles, whether it's like showering with a bucket or not, like bucket flushing the toilet or not, sitting in the middle of the jungle eating versus like sitting in the middle of your air conditioned kitchen eating. I knew what I was getting into going to the Philippines. I'm kind of excited that I got to experience it just because it's a simple life in a lot of places there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What were your, if you have like a favorite memory or two that you want to share from being there, what would it be?
Oh, okay. I think two favorite two favorite memories because I tell one of them's a tradition, one of them's kind of a funny story. Tradition, this is kind of cool, and I don't know I don't know if this is still going on with COVID. Maybe only in your close circle of friends. But I met these three girls at a hostel, local Filipinas, and they're like, "We'll take you out to like the food market and then we'll go to this like little bar that has dancing." I'm like totally down. Now I have new friends on the island of Cebu, which is one of the biggest, most populous islands there. And when we were at the bar, they got like a 40-ounce thing of beer and then a small little, maybe like an 8-ounce glass. And what we do, there was four of us, you each pour a little, one at a time, you pour a little into the glass and then you sip it. You take your sip. And then you share that glass and that beer bottle, and everyone does the same thing. And it's pretty much for two reasons: to ensure that no one's poisoning the glass, and two, that you're focused on like the conversation and being present
Right.
rather than like on your phone. So I kind of love that. In the Filipinos, like massive sharing everything, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a cool tradition. I'm like, oh my God, one 40-ounce bottle of beer, one glass, and we all take turns like drinking out of it. This was like like a month before
Yeah.
COVID
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
But I thought it made me feel like close to them. The fact that I was a complete stranger, even though I am like Filipino American, they're like, oh, she's one of us. I'm a complete stranger. They just literally picked me up at a hostel. But the fact that they're like, well, we trust her in this little like drinking circle
Yeah. That's
was
so
kind of cool.
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting tradition because then after that, it happened a few more times in different circles of friends that I was like invited to drink with. So I was like,
Oh,
wow, this is like an actual Filipino tradition that people do.
yeah. I like that. I like that a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
I mean, like when I definitely have shared drinks with people before. Like, I think it makes sense. It's
Yep.
cute.
Definitely, definitely. And I do like how it's like the focus is like be here and now, don't be like on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then the second story I have is about a cockroach. So we were in my stepmom's hometown of Barobo, which is on Surigao del Norte. And it's like Mindanao group of islands, so the south of the Philippines. And her hometown, it was just installing Wi-Fi when I was there.
Wow.
So it was really like out in the provinces, like dirt roads everywhere. They were just opening up their first 7-Eleven a few months after I got there. And 7-Eleven's big in Asia. I'm not sure if you know
Yeah.
that, but
Oh, yeah.
massive,
I've
yeah,
talked about it
massive in Asia.
before. I love 7-Eleven. When I was in Asia, I spent too much time. Like every time I saw one, I needed to see what snacks they had.
Yeah.
The grilled cheese is amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So it was this town that was still developing really, but they had an amazing like river, a waterfall, a lagoon, a lake, like beautiful nature. Anyways, my dad and I were staying up late one night watching a movie, and I was like, we're perpendicular couches to each other, and I saw like a cockroach hopping across the tile floor, and it was headed straight for the bedroom. And I was sharing, because the house is tiny, I was sharing a bedroom with um my dad and stepmom. They were in one bed, I was in the other, but I knew in my head my luggage was wide open in that
Yeah.
bedroom. And I'm like, see this cockroach hopping? And I screamed and I put my feet up. And my dad, like whenever he goes back to the Philippines, he reverts back to his like true Filipino roots, right?
Yeah.
So first thing he does tells me, "Shut up, Leah, don't scream." And then I'm like, "Oh my God, Dad." And then like Spider-Man reflexes, I'm not even kidding. He sprints to the door and slams it shut and the cockroach doesn't get in. And I'm like, oh my, first off, how did you get to that door so fast? It's like 15 feet away. And second off, um, thank you. And the reason he didn't want me to scream is, well, one, the house is sleeping, but two, if they were awake and I screamed, we have this word in Tagalog. It's the word is maarte. So it means kind of like, hmm, what's the technical term for it? It's kind of like fancy, snobby, like kind of too good for things.
Yeah.
And so, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Erin. My dog is clawing at the door.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, let me finish the story. But basically, yeah, he didn't want me to sound so maarte by screaming and being like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, this cockroach on the ground." And so the lesson is basically pretend you're not phased by
Yeah.
cockroaches when you go to another developing country.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Because I was that person in Cambodia who went to the desk in the hostel and was like, I need you to come and kill this cockroach. My friends and I, and this was like, we'd been in Cambodia for like 2 weeks. It was our first time in Asia. And we just like, we hadn't acclimatized yet to like the size of bugs in southern climates. We do not get cockroaches that size. Like, in Ontario. They
Oh
just don't
my
exist.
gosh.
And
No.
so we were having a total meltdown. And thank God this like Cambodian guy was like, yeah, I'll help you. But he was laughing his head off the whole time at how ridiculous we were
And
being
he's
afraid of
probably
this thing.
like, if I clean this up, if I get rid of this, there's going to be 10 more waiting.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
oh my God.
I have been to the Netherlands now a couple times. Thankfully, it's not as far a flight as the Philippines, so I've been able to squeeze in a few more trips. I actually went when my school had student exchange in
Wow.
university. I ended up doing
Nice.
exchange in the Netherlands, which was amazing because it gave me like an excuse to live there and spend more time with family and like learn more about it. So um, I'm really like
Very
happy
cool.
that I was able to do that. But yeah, like throughout the time that I've spent in Holland, I would say that my understanding of my own Dutchness has changed a little bit. Like, I hadn't ever felt like I wasn't Canadian. And I also want to say, like, I think it's always been easy for me to feel Canadian because I'm white. And so no one has ever challenged me on whether or not I look or sound or behave Canadian.
Right.
But experiencing the Netherlands like kind
Huh.
of affirmed my Canadianness in a way that it hadn't been affirmed before because it's kind of like being immersed in another country. I felt the differences more and I realized like these little things that I do. The shoes taking off thing, like that is a Canadian thing. And I noticed that in the Netherlands because a lot of people in Holland don't take their shoes off. And so moments like that, you're like, oh, I am
Yeah.
Canadian. Or like people making fun of me all the time for saying sorry. Like you feel it more when you're outside of it, I guess. So yeah, with all that said, did your American identity, like, did your feelings about it change at all when you finally got to go to the Philippines?
I just stuck out like a sore thumb in the Philippines. Even though I literally look like a Filipino, first off, I'm like half a foot taller than everybody, men and women. And I'm about 40 pounds heavier too. And like, that's just to say because they're tiny, like they're petite. They're so, everyone's like a small frame. I think Southeast Asia, a lot of Southeast Asians in general have like a more petite, like a smaller frame.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt like, I'm a normal like 5'5" average height of the American woman, like mid-sized body. This is normal in
Yeah.
the States or Canada, right? But in the Philippines I felt huge. I felt huge and I felt tall, and the fact that when they would do things or say things, and because I don't know the language, a lot of it for me would be a blank stare.
Mm,
And so I'm like, wow, I am really not Filipino. I'm really not. I mean, I'm not from the Philippines. I'm like truly Filipino American. I have no idea
yeah.
what they're talking about,
Yeah.
So there were moments, yeah, where I was just like out of my element, and I'm like, do I belong here? you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, so I guess like ultimately I know that I'm not like truly Dutch, but the Netherlands is still like definitely part of my identity. So sometimes I think like about how identity isn't whole, and I kind of touched on this like in the beginning with that question about home. I really feel like it's kind of made up of all these separate pieces that come together from our cultural backgrounds and our family histories and et cetera to sort of make up this like puzzle of identity. So I'm curious how like you would factor your Filipino heritage into like your larger identity.
I definitely consider myself like I very much use all the time Filipino American, because people are always gonna ask. They're always gonna be like curious about where my dark hair and dark features come from. So my parents are from the Philippines, and like I mentioned earlier, I definitely try to research on my own now that I'm an adult, and I purposely try to fit it into my culture, not just the taking the shoes off in the house, but more like okay, what was our history like? Like, why do we have so much influence from the Japanese, the Spanish, the British, the Americans? You know, why have the Philippines been speaking English for 120 years? Like, these are all things that I went to go and find out on my own. So I am proud of my culture. And now it's up to me. Like, I go and support these bakery pop-ups. I go and support Filipino artists. Like, now it's up to me to kind of solidify that, like, first generation Filipino are those Americans, and make sure that, like, we are seen and heard and can feel comfortable being part of both cultures these days. So that's
Hmm.
how it fits into my life. Like, it's very much part of me, but it's like I said, being Filipino American is very different than being like Filipino in the Philippines.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think that's like true for basically like anyone who's like
Oh
part
yeah.
of a like anyone who's migrated essentially or is like a child of a migrant or grandchild even because you have those roots but like they're not you're not part of that country really. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how I'm saying this, but
Yeah, you just grew up.
yeah.
I mean, you grew up in a different area completely. Like, you still
Mhm.
bring some of the traditions, but it's not going to be everything because now you're just like creating a mixture, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
As you're growing up. Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to bring up are these tours that have become like more popular, I would say. Like I've definitely noticed people talking about them more in recent years, and they're tours that bring people back to their homelands. So, for example, I just wanted to look one up to give an example.
Mm-hmm.
The company Black and Abroad operates group tours to Ghana and Senegal. And one of the co founders of the company, Eric Martin, said in an interview for Travel and Leisure that for people on the tours, quote, making a pilgrimage to these West African countries, seeing the sights, hearing the personal accounts of our African ancestors directly from their surviving descendants creates a cathartic connection. So I think, especially for people who've been displaced, some through force, like through the slave trade, or sorry, like through the slave trade, heritage tours can be really therapeutic. And the article quotes Brian Oliver, who's a Baltimore based nonprofit director who visited the 5 African countries that matched his DNA. And he says that the trips have made him feel more in touch with himself and his culture than ever before. So yeah, and now they have these tours. Like I know they run them, bringing Armenian Canadians back to Armenia.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
so
like
cool.
that's there's a lot of Armenians in Toronto actually.
Oh,
Um,
really? What? That's
yeah.
funny because LA is the Armenian capital of the US.
Oh no, wait, that makes
Yeah,
sense. The
tons of
Kardashians are
Armenians
there.
here. Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of Armenians, and they
Yeah,
like run half the city. Like, they're
yeah.
just also an amazing culture, but I feel like there's like there are a lot of wealthy Armenians out here
There
too.
are, yeah, yeah,
So
in
good for
Toronto
them.
too. Yeah. No, I actually know this because I used to work for an organization that did a lot of work in the Armenian community.
Oh,
Um,
very cool.
yeah. So yeah, you can take those tours. There's also, of course, like I forget what it's called, but Israel like famously has a tour that brings people back.
Yeah,
What is it called?
birthright,
Birthright.
birthright.
Birthright. So yeah,
Literally the coolest program.
yeah.
I feel like honestly every country should have that.
Yeah, and I feel like it does like help people to feel like connected to a culture that they've been displaced from, which is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, did traveling to the Philippines make you feel more in touch with Filipino culture?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And I was so curious about it before. That's why I finally just said, you know what? I'm just going to go do it without my parents because who knows what
Yeah,
tomorrow will bring. It could bring a pandemic. And it did.
it did.
Unfortunately, yes. So it definitely did. And I think it's cool because I had one parent there. So I felt like I learned a lot from him, my father. But it'll be interesting if I have my mom there too. So
Yeah,
hopefully, I can go on a trip with her so she can show me like the Philippines through her eyes and whatnot. But I met so many people while I was there and met my extended family on my stepmom's side that I'm lucky enough that I will always have family to go back to and like places to visit while I'm there. And I want to get to a point where the Philippines is like an annual trip for me.
yeah.
So I just had such an amazing first experience that I'm like, all right, I'm ready to do this every year.
Aw, that's wonderful. I
Yeah.
hope you do get to. I hope one day you have a
Thanks.
house there and you
I
can
know.
spend 6 months a year there.
That would be the life. But like you, okay, you mentioned earlier that um who was it? Your parents or your grandparents gave up their Dutch citizenship when they came
Hmm.
here. Well, in the Philippines, you can't buy property unless you have um a passport, and the only way that I can get a passport is if my parents were still
Oh,
citizens when I was born and they were not. So now I'm like, okay, now I got
oh,
to try to find whatever loopholes or get lawyers involved so I can like get help. But eventually, yes, I'd love to get like a passport and buy property there. I can buy, I'm sorry,
yeah.
land. I can't buy land there. I could buy property.
Right,
But
right, right, right.
mhm.
Yeah, it's complicated, like going in and getting that document, like after the fact, because the same thing happened in our family. Obviously, like at one point, I was like, "Can I get a Dutch passport?"
Mhm.
And I did look into it, and they actually won't issue passports unless you give up the one you're currently
Oh, you're
holding.
kidding.
So
Ugh.
I would have to, like, I have the paperwork to do it, but obviously I don't want to give up my Canadian citizenship.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my partner actually is pursuing getting his Italian passport because
Mhm.
Italy will allow you to hold dual, but it's literally years. Like he has been on a
Yeah.
waiting list for years and there's like lawyers involved. It's
Yeah.
wild how complicated it is. Like I think
Oh
it'll
my
probably be
gosh.
like 5 more years before he actually gets the passport.
Does he speak Italian?
No, like he's like
Okay.
little bits, but no,
Yeah.
he wishes he
Yeah, I
does.
heard that was pretty difficult too. So, oh,
Yeah.
good luck to him.
Yeah. I hope it happens because then if I marry him, I can have an EU passport.
Yes, that's okay. Honestly, because isn't Holland part of the EU, Netherlands part of the
Yeah.
EU as well, right? That's what
Yeah.
that's the only thing I'm thinking about, Erin. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, girl, get that Dutch passport."
I know. I know. So before we wrap up, I wanted
Mhm.
to circle back to talking about home. Why do you think traveling home to your country of heritage was so important for you? And like, why do you think it's important for children of immigrants in general?
Oh, that's so good. I just think that if we don't pass these traditions on and we don't try to keep your motherland alive through future generations, it can all be lost, to be honest. And like I said earlier, I feel like it's almost becoming lost on me. That's why I'm trying so hard as an adult to stay attached to it and stay open-minded and make sure to try to infuse it into myself and my niece and if I have kids and whatnot. And I think it's great for an understanding of the world and seeing how vastly different maybe a Southeast Asian country and a North American country are from one another,
Hmm.
right? And when we understand those cultures, we understand each other as human beings, and we have a more open-minded view of how the world works and how these differences are acceptable and appreciated and celebrated every day. So, I wish I could have gone while I was younger, but I had to make do with going going at 30 plus years old and couldn't have asked for a better trip. But yeah, I do think it's important. Like I said, I want to take my niece. She's a quarter Filipina, a quarter white and half Latina Mexican, and I'm like, we're taking you to Mexico and we're taking you to the
Yeah.
Philippines. She's 9
Yeah.
months old. She doesn't know it yet, but we're doing it.
I love it. There's such beauty in like the way that the world is sort of like blending. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I just think it's like really beautiful if we can like live like you living in America, being able to like bring this Filipino culture like into your life there and sharing it with like other people that you know. Like I'm learning a lot right now chatting with you, and I'm sure other people that
Aw.
you know learn chatting from you. And it's just kind of nice like that we can all share what we know about these homelands that we originally came from. It's something that I like really love talking to people about.
Yeah, I absolutely love talking about it. And even just hearing about, maybe your Dutch traditions and cultural differences too, and like your trip back there. I think that's so awesome because you would think, oh, like the Netherlands, like they're in Europe, like it's easy. It's like some people would be, oh, it's like America. No, so wrong.
No.
Yeah.
It's funny, like I really thought that I wouldn't be culture shocked living there. And I was. Like I
Yeah.
definitely was. But it's more subtle because like of course there's a lot of similarities between especially like Northwestern European countries and North America. But there are like very subtle differences that you really start to feel when you're living there. I don't think a
Yeah.
tourist would pick up on it, but like even the famous Dutch directness. Have you heard of this?
Oh yeah. I've
So
experienced a lot just making Dutch
yes.
friends on the road too. I'm like,
Oh,
whoa,
yes.
okay.
Yeah. Very direct. And I lived with 3 Dutch girls, and it's very Canadian to be very emotional and sensitive, like to the way that people talk. We're very passive communicators, and Dutch people are the opposite. And so I would like always have my I would always have my feelings hurt because they would be very direct about things about the household, right? And
No.
in Canada, you're very like passive. Like I would go into the kitchen and say, "Hey Luke, do you mind doing the dishes?" Where in
Right.
the Netherlands, like my roommate would be like, "You didn't do the dishes. Do
Yeah.
them."
Or yeah. Or not even you didn't do that. Just be like, hey, do the dishes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I get that.
And it was hard to adjust to that. So little things like that, it was kind of funny. It impacted me more than I thought it would living there.
Yeah.
Because I think, yeah, people a lot of times think you get to skip the culture shock in Europe, but it's not always the case. So before we let you go, do you want to share with everyone where they can find you?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Erin, for having me on. This was a lot of fun and also brought back amazing memories, and I felt like I learned a lot from you. So
Aw.
thank you for having me. But anyways, Leah, LA in Flight on every social media platform you can think of. I'm also the co-host of the Ticket to Anywhere podcast, where we're helping you adventure from anywhere. So you can find us on any podcast platform, and we are also on YouTube.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Ticket to Anywhere podcast. Don't forget to connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. If you love travel as much as we do, hit subscribe on our YouTube channel, as well as anywhere you listen to podcasts such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Pocket Casts. Thank you all for your support so far. When you have the time, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love to hear your thoughts and feedback, and it'll help others come across our episodes and hopefully be inspired to travel and adventure anywhere.